Mayoral Forum on Housing, alongside the statewide Tenant Coalition Housing Justice for All that Westside HCC are members of. So, 4 years ago, in the thick of COVID, we held our first Mayoral Forum, and actually one of the candidates who attended did go on to become mayor, so, good precedent. He couldn't make the day. I think Zero Bond may have opened early, unclear. But regardless, there's a very good chance that one of the people seated on this stage will be the next mayor of this city. So, for the last 2 months, tenants across the West Side put our heads together. We brainstormed, we came up with questions, we voted on topics, and we decided what we want to ask these questions about, the nitty-gritty of how they will combat the housing crisis. So, just a little context so we're all on the same page. Most tenants are rent burdened, paying over 30% of their incomes towards rent. Evictions have skyrocketed to pre-pandemic levels. We have an aging housing stock, where too many tenants live in poor conditions and receive no repairs. And meanwhile, the most recently available data from the Rent Guidelines Board show that the average rent-stabilized landlord's operating income increased over 10% in the previous year, and nowhere higher than here in Manhattan. So I got a couple questions. We got questions for these guys, but first we got some questions for you in the audience. And the first one is, ready to respond. Can I hear you make some noise if you want a mayor who will crack down on bad landlords? What about a mayor who will house the homeless? Props in the air, but make some noise if you want a mayor who will freeze your rent.
Yes!
A minute to respond, and then 1 minute to answer any follow-up from our moderator. Go, Jeff Colton.
All right, thank you so much, Charlie.
Say it briefly again. Say it again for the video. No demolition to have NYC.
No demolition for NYC.
We do not want any demolition to NYC.
No demolition.
It's their homes.
Thank you.
No developer, no sell-off to
I'm also a
developer.
Fordham University graduate, so I'm the author a daily newsletter on New York politics called New York Playbook. So I write about all these candidates all the time. They're already tired of me, and the race is 7 months away. So for all of you who want to follow New York politics, if you don't already, please sign up for New York Playbook. Thank you.
Usted
We have
está ahí.
7 candidates up here. This is the biggest forum yet.
Ah, qué bueno.
And we have a lot of questions, so I will jump right in on the questions. We're going to go, we'll start in order, so we don't know where we start with you, we'll go that way, and then, as you guys know, we do kind of a waterfall thing. We'll start with one next. So, as Charlie mentioned, the majority of New York City tenants
¿Ya comió?
are rent burdened.
Va a comer afuera.
There are 2.4 million of those tenants live in rent-stabilized units. Many of them are here today. Not quite 2.4 million are here today, but it can feel like it with that energy. And look, one of the candidates on the stage has really thrown down the gauntlet with a rent freeze. So we're going to ask down the line here and see if anybody is brave enough to say no in this room. But the first question is, will you commit to implementing a rent freeze on rent-stabilized tenants? And again, in 1 minute each, and we'll start with, did we introduce each? No. I'm so sorry. I should do that. So, I know them all, I was all excited. First thing, you know what, we told them no introduction, so we're just gonna zoom right through. This is State Senator Zellner Myrie of Brooklyn. Assembly Member Zoran Mamdani of Queens. Former New York City Controller Scott Strickland of Manhattan. State Senator Jessica Ramos of Queens. Current New York City Controller Brad Lander of Brooklyn. former Assembly Member and DNC Vice Chair Michael Blake of the Bronx. And Attorney Jim Walden of Brooklyn. And with that, straight into questions. So, State Senator, we'll start with you. Thoughts on a rent freeze?
I'm a rent-stabilized tenant. I grew up in a rent-stabilized apartment, and my mom still lives in that apartment that she raised me in. So I didn't just adopt protecting tenants for my campaign or even for my political future. I have stood on my own 2 feet in housing court with my mother to keep her in her home and prevent eviction. So as the mayor of this city, I will appoint members of the Rent Guidelines Board that will be putting our renters first.
And is that another?
Yes, I will freeze the rent every single year that I want to be clear as to how we can do that. The mayor has the exclusive authority to appoint every single member of the Rent Guidelines Board. There are 9 members of that board. 8 of those members' terms have expired, could be replaced tomorrow. We have seen a precedent for a rent freeze 3 times under Mayor de Blasio. What we have seen in the Rent Guidelines Board's own data as of March of this year is that landlords who own at least 1 unit of rent-stabilized apartment in their building have seen an increase in their income by 10%. Their expenses have only increased by 6%. So they're making more than the expenses that they're actually facing. What we need is someone to stand up for tenants, and those tenants need to be rent-stabilized tenants first and foremost.
Now, I am going to be covering some follow-up questions, so I'm not just picking on you. We're going to be going all the way through. But I do want to ask you, the landlords, they are basically already saying, if you pledge a rent freeze, we're going to sue you. You can't proactively say that. What's your response to that argument?
My response is that I'm going to appoint members of the RGB who will vote in line with reality. What we see reality to be is that tenants, especially in rent-stabilized apartments, they have an average median income under that of New York City. And yet, landlords who claim they need to raise the rent on an annual basis to cover their operating costs, I'll leave those words right there. But they are often receiving rent increases that far outstrip the operating costs. And furthermore, there is a program within city government where if a landlord feels they cannot make up their costs through the rent that they are receiving from their tenants, they can apply for relief from the city. You know how many landlords did that? 1. And the reason that the number is so low is that it's much easier to cry bankruptcy when you don't actually have to open your books. So I invite any landlord that is facing that pressure to open their books, and if they are facing that mismatch, the city can help them.
All right, Scott.
I have, in my career, working with many of you, have testified year in and year out for the last many decades to freeze the rent at the Rent Guidelines Board. I have been there side by side with you more than anyone on this platform. And I believe very strongly, and I think Zoran has a very strong, that we need to ensure that we split the burden. If you are a landlord and you can prove hardship, well, come right in. But do not think that you can gouge the people who built this city. And that's all of you. Think about this. You moved to neighborhoods that nobody wanted to live in. You built the schools, you built the daycare centers. You created a lifestyle that was so incredible that every speculator wanted to build and profit on your back. No demolition! Mitchell-Lama, public housing, rent stabilization. We finally need a mayor that understands this history, this powerful history. And I will work to make sure that the people who have rent stabilized apartments can live there in a rent that's commensurate with income and with the stability for our neighborhood.
Save public housing! Save public housing! Save public
public housing! Save public housing! Save public housing! Save public housing! Save public housing!
I am a rent-stabilized tenant of 13 years. My apartment allowed me to leave an unhealthy relationship and carry me through divorce so I could keep a roof over my head. And my 2 boys who are over there in that corner joining us today. I am also someone who is proud to have been a part of the administration that delivered on rent freezes for many years here in the city of New York. And I am ready to win a rent freeze again. The way we get there matters. For a very long time, we've seen how rhetoric from landlords about their rising costs have only sown greater division in our city. And that's why one of the main tenets of my campaign is property tax reform. Because it is not okay that I, as a rent-stabilized tenant, pay $5,000 a year in property tax, but someone who owns a brownstone in Park Slope pays $3,000 a year in property tax. And if our property value assessments continue to penalize renovated buildings, well then we're never going to be able to get landlords to put more apartments back on the market. There's a lot of work to do. Let's win that rent freeze.
Good afternoon, I'm Brad Zander. Since 1993, for over 30 years, I've been working with housing conservation coordinators and many of you to keep rents down. You guys came up with, HCC came up with the certificate of no harassment idea. You wanted an Hell's Kitchen. I wanted citywide in the city council, built and preserved more affordable housing when I was working at the Davenue Committee in the city council, and as controller did the biggest preservation purchase in New York City history, 35,000 units of rent-stabilized housing put at risk by the Signature Bank failure. We preserved it. Look, the RGB is broken, everybody knows it. That's why Eric Adams was able to raise your rent 9% in just 3 years in office. They're not required to look at tenant incomes. They're not required to look at the burdens that you guys are facing. So, when I am mayor, I will appoint people to that board who are themselves tenants, who make sure every year to look at what's actually happening with tenant incomes, keep those rents. And I have stood with you many years, fought for that rent freeze, fought to keep rents down as low as they can possibly be, consistent with making sure that money goes into repairs in the building, to pay in the supers, and making sure that code enforcement is strengthened, so that we don't just have affordable housing with low rents, that we have good, decent, rent-stabilized housing for many, many years.
Affordable to who? No demolition, no city gas.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Michael Blake. I've spent many years with many of you in this room. Let's answer the question, should we freeze rent? The answer is yes. Now let's go a step further. We have to make sure we protect you at all levels. To the question around and the comment around public housing, I stood with you when I was an assembly member to make sure we actually made reform when it comes to public housing. For the comment when it came to Mitchell-Lama, I was the chair of Mitchell-Lama, we made it very clear that what was happening to too many of you was wrong and unjust. We also have to hold people accountable for these bad landlords who are not actually helping you right now. Instead of just finding them, put them in jail for what they've been doing.
Yes!
It is about saying very clearly, you have to address cost of living. You have to make sure you have affordable health care. It is the reason why I say there has to be universal child care, while we also have stronger opportunities when it comes to your housing. If you would like to understand more about my policies, I grew up at Crested and Burnside in the Bronx. I lived there with my family. My mama was homeless. I understand these journeys because it is the understanding of why we fight. If you want to learn more while we're doing this work, join us at blakefornyc.com, and thank you for having us today.
That was powerful, but I'm going to stay seated for you. I really appreciate Michael's decision to answer the question directly. Because what you see here is 40 plus years of career politicianing, and I'm not one of them, right? So I'm going to answer the question directly. Will I freeze rents? The answer is yes, with a condition. Condition number one is, wait, hold on a second. Any landlord that will not open up the books to show the operating costs versus the income gets a rent freeze, period, full stop. Second, what's the problem? He said it best. It's bad landlords. Do you know that if I go to buy, hold on a second, if I buy stock on the market, the person that's selling me stock has to take a test,
has to be certified, has to agree to a morals clause, and if they don't follow the law, they get thrown out of being stockbrokers. You can be a landlord in this city and be a complete jerk. You can abuse people. You cannot fix. There's nothing to do. What do we do about that? We police landlords thoroughly. We come up with a yearly certification process, and if they fail 2 consecutive years in a row, they get red freezes. That's the way to solve the problem, so that we don't punish the good landlords and we punish the bad landlords.
It's
That's what the system should do.
Thank you. So we'll start with the assembly member on this one. The rent guidelines board only covers 1 million units. There are a lot of public housing units and also just open market housing. So how will your administration keep rents down for everyone else?
At its core, what my administration will do is pursue a city-wide planning process. We have to leave the days of spot neighborhood rezonings behind. That policy, what we've seen under previous administrations, is exacerbated segregation across New York City. What we need to do is take a 5-borough approach, where the city is using every single tool at its disposal to ensure that we are building affordable housing for a wide range of incomes. We need to be housing the New Yorker who is currently sleeping on our streets, the New Yorker who is in our shelter, the New Yorker who is a nurse and married to a teacher and still on 2 union salaries cannot find an affordable place to live in this city. We need to build housing for each and every one of those New Yorkers, and we need to do it in a way that is permanently affordable, because we have to ensure that the guiding light here is keeping New Yorkers in their homes.
Thank you. I will, before the other candidates speak, I'll say the next question is about City of Yes, so you don't have to focus on City of Yes, so you'll get to that. But Scott, please.
For too long, from multiple mayoral administrations, we have built housing for the very wealthy, with enclaves for the poor, and nothing aspirational. And it's time that we had a mayor who can operationalize what mayors used to do. Think about a generation or 2 ago. LaGuardia, the mayor, built public housing. 2,600 buildings. Gave opportunity and hope for people. The Mitchell-Lama housing program is the most successful housing program in human time. 60,000 units in New York City, 105,000 statewide. It was the middle-class mecca that had diverse people on Hyde Park. We now have in this city 1,000 at least vacant parcels of land. The city owns it. We give it away to speculators. It's time that we gave it to the not-for-profit communities and the housing-first communities that will build the next generation of housing. You see, if you give away that housing so people know what to do with it, the land is free. And as mayor, I'll work with the state and the city to create the largest housing program. And let me just say one word here that I think only you understand here, because we're not seeing this anywhere else. I'm getting ready for the next question. We need to build low-income housing. So we have to do it.
We do need to build low-income housing. We also need to build low-equity home ownership. You know, there are a lot of solutions that have been hiding in plain sight for a long time. I in the state Senate carry a bill called the Jobs and Housing Act that would resurrect the idea of leveraging our taxpayer dollars with union pension funds to build low-equity homes like Penn South, like Co-op City in the Bronx, like Elect Chester out in Queens, like Wabassi out in Brooklyn, so that we can do that again and provide workforce housing for folks. But I already mentioned how property tax can actually level the playing field. City Hall has not been applying the law correctly and has not been doing uniform property value assessments. They're largely based on rent-stabilized units instead of on market rents. And that has allowed landlords to get away with murder. So we need to be able to have different ability to have different tools from our toolbox to build more housing, to keep people housed, and I'm sure there'll be a question on NYCHA, but that'll be important to discuss too.
If you want to look at what I'll do to keep rents down and make sure we build affordable housing, you can look at what I've done. Take a look at Gowanus, where 3,000 units of low-income housing, genuinely, permanently low-income housing, are going up. Right now, there is some affordable home ownership. It's mostly rental, and we make sure that every one of the 1,500 NYCHA units in Gowanus and Wyckoff are getting a comprehensive Section 9 modernization and staying public housing, even as they are getting renovated, thanks to the Gowanus rezoning, which is creating 8,000 units, 3,000 of them affordable. Then when those Signature Bank units, when Signature Bank failed and 35,000 rent-stabilized tenants were put at risk, I went into action and used pension funds money. We invested the pension fund. I don't know if you have teachers or any retirees of the city workers here. If we do, thank you. Your pension saved 35,000 units of rent-stabilized housing, keeping them affordable to the tenants who live there, while making a good investment. Let's make sure that every bit of city-owned land goes to nonprofits or community land trusts, as much affordable home ownership and deeply affordable rental housing as we can possibly build. Thank you.
So we need real middle-class housing and affordable housing. We're tossing the word around, but we gotta be specific on it. Scott mentioned Michelamo. When I was chair of Michelamo, one of the things that I did is that I was sick and tired of the people that are waiting to get the next opportunity at the unit who are being skipped and jumped on the list repeatedly. It was wrong, it was unjust, and for those of you that have been working hard to get the opportunity to get that, we have to actually have dedicated middle class and working class funded housing. Too often the conversation is what's happening. You shouldn't be too rich and too poor to have a home in New York City. It is unfair, it is unjust. And too often the policies that are being laid out are not thinking about that. One of the reasons I am running is you have to also assess how the national policies impact us locally. Area median income is not working. We actually need a localized median income that is realistic to what's happening in our neighborhoods. That is how we build truly affordable housing. It is then related to your income and what is happening there. Lastly, you actually have to have protections put in place so that you can actually pass it down to your family. My family came in from Jamaica. We didn't work this hard to have a home and then lose the home because a greedy landlord trying to kick us out right now. That is how you have to do the policy. That is what we're doing to make sure when I see that.
I'll follow up there also. You're talking about AMI. What's your thought, and as somebody who served in Albany, on the tax break programs that we currently rely on to support private development and affordable housing in New York City? And do you want to continue programs like 45X, that kind of thing?
They have to be reformed. To those who couldn't hear the question, you have to have incentives for people to build, but we got to actually make sure the incentives are helping the people. And when we think about it, too often, area median income makes no damn sense because it's actually not helping anybody right now. Now, if you actually decide to implement policies that are related to the neighborhoods that you're in, if I give you an incentive to build accordingly, then it would make sense. And for anyone who will tell you we can't find the money, they literally just found billions of dollars in the city of
How dare you do that?
Number one, should there be incentives? Yes, there should be first incentives for tenants to be able to stay in their homes, and to Justin's point, which I agree, for a tenant to become a homeowner, to give you the chance to realign your dream. Too often, we are not giving you, the tenants, New Yorkers, economic incentives to keep your home. It should not just be for someone to build, it be for someone to actually keep their residence. Lastly, I'm also a reverend. Too often, our nonprofits have not had the opportunities. We have to make sure that we are focused and dedicated, that incentives are helping nonprofits as well, because nonprofits are the ones that are making sure that development can happen correctly in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, so you guys don't know me, so let me just make sure you're clear about something. There's one person here, actually, that came this close to being homeless, and that's me. I slept on a floor for a year.
I slept on a couch.
I literally slept on the floor. I slept on the floor for a year because I didn't have a place to go. I had the worst landlords you could possibly imagine. My sister was evicted. My other sister was almost evicted. Like, I understand this thing of not being able to meet your bills and having your rent be 50% of your income. That's why I worked 4 jobs. So what I'm going to do as mayor is do what has already been done in Los Angeles to great acclaim. Karen Bass, the mayor there, what did she do on day one? She declared a housing emergency. And that relieved her of certain regulatory burdens to allow the city to start doing the three things it needs to do. There are about 40,000 units of rent-stabilized apartments right now that are being warehoused, right? We have to bring those back online. There are 5,000 warehouse units that need to be brought online right now. And there are more than 1,000 vacant properties or lots that are being mothballed by private interests that don't want to develop. The city should acquire those and start building now. That's what I'm going to do.
And protect public housing.
So I appreciate everyone's answers, and I think it's important for people to vocalize what they think should be done. But there are New Yorkers right now who cannot afford their rent, who don't just want to hear answers, they want to see a plan. They want to see a plan, and I'm the only person on this stage that has actually put forward a plan, Rebuild NYC, a mandate for 1 million homes over the next decade, half of which would create 200,000 affordable units, preserve another 300,000, an actual plan to bring costs down. We need permanent homes, not just shelters, and a plan to do that. We need revenue for our public housing so people can live with dignity, not just rhetoric. We need laws that will go after bad landlords, that will protect our tenants, that will actually fund right to counsel, that will actually do the things to bring our costs down. And yes, we need to build more homes. That is a fact. That is the only way we are going to bring rent down for everyone, and I'm the only one that has a plan to do that. Rebuild NYC.
I would like to follow up on that as well. I saw it, I read the plan, I saw an interesting comment that there was no mention of union work rules, and that's often, raises up prices. Is that not part of the plan, basically? Should there be union work requirements for housing?
Yeah, look, a lot of the development that is proposed in the plan already requires union labor and union work. So we would not be who we are today. In fact, I am the son of labor union members. I would not have health insurance if my dad was not a part of a union. So I think it is really important that we incorporate that in our development going forward.
All right, thank you. So we'll start with the former controller on this one, Scott. As I mentioned, City of Yes, this large citywide rezoning plan, multifaceted, just passed the city council.
Not to the City of Yes.
And it came with a lot of commitments secured by the city council, $5 billion in funding overall, they say, and it's going to be largely the following mayor's job to enforce that, to follow through on these. So I'm wondering if you are basically committing to the City of Yes provisions and whether you would make any particular, any large-scale changes as mayor. So again, Scott, we'll start with you.
Well, first of all, the Adams administration has spent 3.5 years on a zoning change, the City of Yes. While people are hanging by a thread in their homes, while people are facing eviction, this administration is applauding what is basically a City of Yes light. We need a mayor who's going to come in there and shake it up a little bit, or shake it up a lot. And my housing plan is going to be geared towards the people who need government intervention to help. Look, the market will build more density, and I think we need it, because I think it will impact eventually market rate housing, middle income housing, but government has got to get back into the low income housing business. That's why I did the audit of the vacant land that people talk about on the stage. That's why when I was in the state assembly, I talked about the 2,000 NYCHA vacancies and still talk about it today as controller. It's why I invested $1 billion as controller to make sure that we could fund affordable union housing. Now look, Adam said we're gonna shoot for the sky, 500,000 affordable housing units. My good friend and colleague, Zelma Myrie, says 1 million. I'm gonna say we do 2 million, no, I'm just kidding. I think we have to think about not just what our aspirations are, but who has the leadership and experience in actually building and doing that? And that's going to be your district.
Well, I'm actually the only candidate up here who's not only worked at City Hall, but has worked with the building trades, the union that actually does build housing in the city of New York. And I think that across the 3 mayoral administrations that I have had a front row seat to, because I started my career as a staffer in the city council during the Bloomberg administration 20 years ago, we see a lot of mayors' housing plans come and go. There was mandatory inclusionary housing in the previous administration, and yet we have not seen the number of housing that we need in order to address the people that we have in shelters and the people who we have doubled and tripled up in our communities, who we don't talk about very often. So this is, I think, in terms of City of Yes, the City Council did as much as they could in order to make it a little better, but ultimately what we need is a real plan to build housing that allows families to plant some real roots in our communities so that we have a fighting chance to keep a stable roof over our heads and build the generational wealth that we deserve.
Thank you. I'll ask you a follow-up there. Senator, are there any particular, would you like to see a different thing with City Yes? Are there changes you would push for? Because I believe that actually a portion of your district, the member voted against it, right? And so there's, unlike some of the districts here, like a lot, your constituency is divided on this, basically.
And so is my district. I hail from Queens. Jackson Heights, where I live, is a landmarked district where there are many co-ops, some condos, and lots of rent-stabilized tenants like me. Then there is Corona, East Elmhurst, where we have some small homeowners, but also some big buildings. And then we have Left Rack City, right? Ground zero in New York City for evictions, where people have been bogged down by a billionaire on FCIs, now IAIs, for years. And all I've seen is how many families have been displaced by the current situation. So as mayor, I will be putting forth a plan that is sensible, that is realistic, that is supported by the labor movement who is going to build housing, and that actually acknowledges the economic realities of the landlords, because I'm tired of waiting for trickle-down housing. It's not going to happen. We're going to have to make it happen ourselves.
So 20 years ago, housing conservation coordinators and I were amongst the only folks who spoke up in opposition when the Bloomberg administration downs on most of Staten Island and eastern Queens and the northeast Bronx and took away the ability for housing to get built in wealthier neighborhoods. And that's part of why City of Yes was necessary, to make sure there is some room to build more housing. But look, it was never going to solve the affordable housing crisis. That is what the next mayor needs to focus on. So let's talk about what that money needs to do. There's supposed to be right to counsel for every single tenant facing eviction, and yet we're not providing for even half of them. If there's billions of dollars, then that money needs to go to defend tenants facing eviction and fulfill the right to counsel legislation I was proud to co-sponsor, and we need to implement. Then we want to use that money for programs like the Neighborhood Pillars program that works with nonprofit organizations to buy at-risk housing when a landlord's not providing heat year after year. We've got one of those crappy landlords. Let's use that money to make sure that is actually preserved as genuinely low-income housing, affordable and working-class housing for the people who live there. That's how we can go from City of Yes to City of Yes for everyone.
It's a gift to the developers.
Exactly.
To the question around City of Yes, there are things that they should have done that they did not. First of all, they didn't actually address the affordability crisis.
Right.
The reality is you building more units doesn't actually address the problem. And that was not poorly implemented in that. Second, to Brad, which I agree, you have to have greater legal protections. My former chief of staff, Aaron Carr, is the one that's leading Housing Rights Initiative, which has been going across the city, actually protecting people, whether you're a tenant or a homeowner. That should have been mandatory. And third and finally, the next mayor is taking office January 1st, 2026. You have to have a mayor that will be standing up against the Trump Eric Adams agenda. They should have had protections. for our homeless children, when there are too many of our homeless kids that are not being protected. There should have been more protection for our immigrant families that are terrified that they're going to be deported and kicked out. And there should have been protection to make sure that our seniors at all levels have the protections in place. What they just demonstrated with City of Yes is that they wanted to build more units, but they didn't make it more affordable. It doesn't really matter if you have a unit if you can't pay for it.
This guy. Okay, so day number one, I say that there's a crisis, right? And what's going to happen right after I say that there's a housing crisis? We do what City of Yes didn't do, which is create a tenant's bill of right that is enforceable, right? The last time there was a real tenant's bill of rights, it was 2013. It was Comptroller Stringer that put it on his website. It was for informational purposes only. We need a bill of rights for tenants that is enforceable. If you want to participate in the housing program, then you have to sign up for a bill of rights that can be enforced. Where? The housing courts are not working. Yes, of course we should give people access to counsel, but not in a system where they have to wait 2 years to get their cases heard and disposed of. We need to scrap the housing court and come up with a new agency that is in the boroughs, where people don't have to trudge to housing court because those mini courts are in their borough and they're staffed with housing lawyers who know what greedy landlords look like. And when they're greedy landlords, they lose their certifications. So when I have my own housing program, it is not going to be City of Yes, because City of Yes is City of Band-Aids. We need comprehensive solutions to build up smart, so it's not just giveaways for developers, but there's real incentives for affordable housing that is meaningful and will punch a hole, not the small amount of units that are going to be built by City of Yes.
Mr. Wong, thank you for mentioning it.
Thank you. Look, I think the City of Yes was a good and important step, but that it did not go far enough. We have to build more, and we have to preserve and protect our tenants. I do not think that those two things are opposite. And anyone that wants to lead this city has to be honest about this conversation. They have to tell people what they need to hear, not always what they want to hear. And the truth is that for us to bring down rent for everybody, it is important that we build, but it's also important, and that as we outline in our Rebuild NYC report, that we fully fund right to counsel, that we use the tools that were provided in HSTPA to go after bad landlords, whether it is a civil penalty or it is a criminal penalty.
Yes.
It is important that we put resources into the rent protection unit. That is a cross-agency effort to protect renters. We have to be serious about this conversation because the affordability crisis is serious. We have to be mature about this conversation because if we do not dream big, and if we do not marshal every resource at our disposal, we're going to lose New York and it will become completely unrecognizable.
That would not happen.
Thank you, Norm.
So, City of Yes is a step, and it is one that thinks exclusively about zoning. We know that to make this city affordable, we have to use every single tool at the city's disposal. When I'm talking about a city-wide approach to how we construct new housing, that also includes taking away buildings from landlords who clearly have no interest in running them. We have bad landlords across the city who have distressed properties, who are behind on an immense amount on their property taxes. And after you give those landlords an opportunity to come to where they need to be, if they do not take that, then we need to start putting these buildings in the hands of neighborhood stewards, and there's no better steward than the tenant themselves. We have seen this work in Williamsburg, we've seen this work on the Lower East Side, we've seen this work in Harlem. It's time that we finally put that power back in the hands of tenants so we can ensure that we actually have a city that you can afford to live in.
Thank you. And a very good transition because, tenants are used to calling 311 and having nothing happening. I'm sure a lot of you have that experience. We know that there's a lot of issues with HPD staffing and whatnot, so I want to ask broadly, what would you do to improve code enforcement particularly for renters. And we'll start with the state senator here.
I would love the opportunity as mayor to reinstitute the tenant support unit. It used to be that we had City Hall actually send door knockers to areas to go door to door, talking to tenants, making sure we know our rights, and establishing a relationship in case if it's winter, there might not be any heat or hot water, and in that way, be able to do some intake and on-the-ground constituent services. That is something that works. Government shouldn't just be at City Hall removed from us. It should actually be at our doorstep, talking with neighbors and making sure we understand what people are going through. Because Right to Counsel is a program that is reactionary to already being in court and having a problem with your landlord. But we have to be able to actually hold our landlords accountable before then. Making sure that 311 is fully staffed and HPD is fully staffed is important, but we want to make sure that we are catching and troubleshooting those problems as early as possible.
Amen.
Thank you, and I will note we also will be getting around to right to counsel and legal services. So save some of your money.
It's freezing cold out today, and in way too many buildings in New York City, the heat is not on. Anybody in a building this morning where the heat is not on? It ain't right. Those housing justice for all caps look good, but you should not have to wear them in your apartment. When I came into office 3 years ago, it was right when that Twin Parks fire happened up in the Bronx. And a big part of that was because there was no heat in that building. So we did an investigation. We looked at how many buildings have persistent heat complaints year after year after year. We found 1,077 rent-stabilized buildings that for 5 years have been complaining about persistent heat complaints, and nothing was done. And so we called for a whole set of really clear steps. The heat sensor program in every one of those buildings. The alternative enforcement program for those buildings. A targeted enforcement program that looks at the buildings where year after year after year, code is not enforced, the heat is not on, the repairs are not done. Unfortunately, we just looked it up now, 75% of those buildings we sent to the Adams administration 2 years ago still have persistent heat complaints. It is time to get all those programs into effect, and if landlords won't get that heat on, then that is the time, and this is a place where Zoran is right. You can't let a building stay in the hands of a landlord that freezes their tenants for 5 years running. That's a building that needs to be transferred to a community land trust or a nonprofit group or the tenants themselves. Thank you.
Twin Parks was 3 blocks from where I grew up. If a landlord doesn't give you heat and protections, then we should make it a point that you don't give them your rent.
That's right.
And if you want to talk about code enforcement, the easiest way to protect things is to make sure that a bad landlord is not making money and profiting off of the poor and the working class. The second piece, we have to be very clear on how we use technology for good. We should make it easier for you to be able to track that you're actually having problems resolved. If you can figure out how a package is getting to your house or a mail goes somewhere across the world, then why can't we figure out an easier way for folks to actually be able to enforce it? The next step on this, we have to have a greater expansion of pro bono attorneys to provide the support for the leaders that are here, as well as making sure that all residents across the city are aware of what you have available. We effectively need a Schoolhouse Rock 2.0 when it comes to housing protection, so that you actually can then have the ability to know what you have to protect you in the first place. So again, make sure that those that should be protecting you are held accountable. At the end of the day, you should not be worried about having heat or hot water or protection over your head. If you want to enforce the codes, make sure they don't get paid. Come on.
So let me be super clear about this. There's one person here that actually represented the NYC community when they had inhabitable conditions, and that was me in 2018. And the litigation that I brought for the citywide council of presidents resulted in $250 million of emergency aid being brought to the entire community. I did that. And I did that why? Because I recognized and realized the problem. And you've heard all of these people talking about bad landlords, bad landlords. They've all been in office for all these years. What has happened? What has changed? Everyone should follow the plan that I laid out, which is to hold landlords accountable because they are certified and they have to get the certification every year. And they are scored. They are scored. If they are scored and they don't certify, they lose the right to rent, which means that their property goes somewhere. Should it go for a not-for-profit? Should it go for the highest bidder? I don't know the answer to that question yet. But one of the things that we all seem violently to agree about, but there's only one person that's been outside the system, is that bad landlords should not continue to have the right to rent to people who they're victimizing. So let's take care of
Yes!
that.
Yes!
5 years from now.
That's the right man.
10 years from now. Let's solve it now.
So one specific thing that HCC and Westside Tenants been involved with is they helped throw a landlord, Daniel of Shalom.
¿Se le va el voto?
It was very
Mira ahí aplaudiendo.
So when you talk about holding landlords accountable, is that something that you would support more of, more HPD, more city attorneys pursuing?
I protected people who were victimized. That's what I did for 10 years. I chose to do that. No one asked me to do that. No one is going to be tougher on bad landlords than me, who had to suffer from them while I was trying to put myself through school. I hated the landlords that I dealt with. They almost evicted me, and they did evict my sister. So no one's going to be tougher on them. Now, do I want to punish good landlords? Obviously not. That's just stupid policy. And I wouldn't say that I would do that just to placate you. But when it comes to bad landlords, what's the problem? The problem is that our housing courts suck. I mean, I'm just going to be blatant about it. What we need is enforcement in the boroughs, right? We need to take the ivory tower out of Manhattan and put it in the boroughs and have them going to the bad landlords and holding them accountable. And when they find the bad landlords, of course, if they're breaking the law, put them in jail. Sue them. Do you know how many cases the city of New York acted, the corporation counsel is the lawyer? Just, may I?
Yes.
There's a law department that's supposed to protect you. Do you know how many cases the prior administrations have actually brought against bad landlords? Almost none. Right? That would be my main goal, is to disqualify them, to bar them from being able to rent if they abuse tenants. Period, full stop.
Yeah, so it's not just every town, we gotta.
Yeah, they're in every borough. I've been to the one in Brooklyn, not just as a representative of the state senate district, but as a tenant trying to keep my mom from getting evicted. Listen, prior to the HSTPA, the criminal penalties for bad landlords were non-existent. I was really proud to not just be a sponsor or to help support, but to help write the HSTPA and to include in that civil and criminal penalties for any landlord that was harassing, abusing, or unlawfully evicting their tenant. So I think we not only need to have a mayor that uses every resource at City Hall to enforce those laws, but we know that far too often people are getting away with kicking our tenants out and still reaping benefits from this system. So I would be a mayor that would not stop in staffing up our Department of Investigations, which we just saw from a Comptroller DiNapoli report is one of the most understaffed agencies in the entire city. And go after corruption in our city and in our agencies, people who have let this type of behavior go by.
If you call 311, you should be able to make an appointment with when the inspector is actually going to come. It is ridiculous to call and then just have an inshallah system where you have no idea what time this inspector is going to come.
Amen.
It is simple, it is straightforward, we can do that. Beyond that, do you know how much money landlords owe the city of New York in fines that have not been collected? It's $800 million, which is enough to make every single bus free in New York City. We just have to collect the fines. So we need to collect those fines, and we need to double the alternate enforcement program. Right now, it's subject to 250 buildings in New York City. We need to bring that to 500 buildings. And we need to hire more HPD inspectors, because right now, tenants, honestly, when you pick up that phone, you know you're not really getting that much closer to the solution that you need. It's time you have a city administration that treats your concerns as the priority that they are.
That's right. Come on, Scott.
So every year, Jumaane Williams, and before Jumaane Williams, Tish James, published the 100 Worst Landlords.
Yeah. Yes.
Let me tell you, I'm going to announce this soon, the Stringer Robin Hood plan. I'm not playing now, it's getting, we're in the middle of the video. We are going to start with that list and bring condemnation proceedings against those landlords so that we can ensure that those properties are taken away and given to not-for-profit organizations. Year after year, we see who's doing it over and over again, and it's wrong. The second thing we have to do, and right to counsel, is for people who have been in that housing court, whether it's the Bronx or Manhattan, I've been in most of them. The truth is, the reason we need right to counsel is there aren't jury trials, there are big trials. Most of the action in housing court is in the hallways. Yes. I know this as a Jerry Nadler staffer because I used to go to housing court with some of you in this room. And we used to have to negotiate the step with very good lawyers. But think about it. Imagine putting a Jim Walden with the tenant for a day. That real estate law crumbles.
Thank you.
But if
I'll catch up there. We're actually, the next question will be on.
But that's what we have to do. So Robin Hood goes into effect January 1st. I'm giving the landlord 6 months to either give back the property, we'll pay for it, but then it's time for you to move out.
And just to confirm, when you say condemn, that's not kicking everybody out of it.
No, I meant that we would take the buildings away from the landlord. Obviously, I meant take it away from the tenant. I meant domain.
All right, so like I mentioned, legal services providers who work with the city's Right to Counsel program, like housing conservation coordinators, they defend tens of thousands of tenants each year, but it's huge case burdens, high staff turnover. We know that there's just massive backlogs in housing courts, and in some cases, as with every other city contractor, they're not getting their city contracts paid out for like months or years. So, what kind of changes would you implement to improve right to counsel or to present, an alternative for that situation? And this one we will starting with, yes, the city control.
My bet is that we have some of the lawyers that are providing defense to tenants in housing court in the room. If you are, can you raise your hand? We say thank you to that set of folks. I was proud to fight alongside you and to be one of the co-sponsors of the bill in 2017 that established right to counsel and then expanded it in 2021. And it started to make a huge difference. When we got up to 2/3 of tenants being represented by lawyers in court, you saw evictions plummet. Unfortunately, we are now back below 50%, and that system is failing right now. And it's failing because we're not paying enough for the attorneys, because there aren't enough attorneys to go in, because the city's contracting program for it is broken. So a couple of choices. We've talked actually a bunch of the legal services providers. There's a set of steps we can take to make those contracts work better. We are going to need to fund them more. The other thing we should do is look at statewide legislation, because a state law for right to counsel could be enforceable in court. So when that judge says, if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. It's not up to the mayor to figure out whether they can or can't get the contract in place. You have it as a guarantee.
Since so often it's nonprofits that are on the front line, my first answer to the question is that I'll be a mayor that reimburses nonprofits faster. Too often nonprofits are waiting too long because of the work that you're doing, because the city and state are actually not helping you. And at the end of the day, we actually have to make it fairer for you for those purposes. When Jim was referencing legal services and supporting in NYC, It was Danny Barber and those that were at Citywide Cop that were my residents that did that. Because at the end of the day, we have to empower the residents and connect them with the lawyers so that you can have a voice at the table. Third, I raised this earlier, the housing rights initiative that is happening across the city right now. That is my former chief of staff, Aaron Carr, because we saw what was happening across the city and that you weren't actually providing the connection of lawyers and support to the tenants. Let's be very clear. At the end of the day, we need to listen to you. Policies don't make any sense if they're written in some arbitrary manner. If we actually listen to you and see what's happening at scale and make it very clear, that is how you make that effort. All of this effort is laid out on our website. Again, I encourage you to go to blakefornyc.com. I'm very specific on how we provide not just legal service support, but additional housing support for tenants across the city. Please do.
Okay, so just to get back to the question was, what would I do as mayor to make sure that the service providers, the lawyers, get paid? It's going to be a really, really complicated answer here, so just follow me. Pay them, okay? So it's not really that simple. But the problem is that a contract gets signed in one administration, and then the administration changes, and priorities change, and suddenly they don't get paid out. So you know what you do when you're mayor and you really care about the lawyers that are doing God's work, protecting tenants? You do two things. First of all, you put a poison pill in the contract when you sign it, so that if a city doesn't pay them on time, they get a premium. And you build that into the contract, and then if they don't get paid, they have a way to go to court and get a premium on their services. The second thing that you do, and this is the thing I was talking about in the last answer, right? You have the corporation counsel doing some of this work alongside these great service providers to bring more cases, because that's what the city should be doing. We spend 80% of the budget for the corporation counsel defending instead of affirmatively going after bad actors. When I'm mayor, that will change, right? We will still defend, we need to defend, but we will have an affirmative litigation unit with an army of great people like that that are going after bad landlords and other bad actors in our city, and I made you that promise. And you know it, if you look me up, Jim Walden, look me up. This is what I've done for 23 years. Find these problems one after another, and go to court. Sorry.
So I'm a lawyer, and I'm really proud that because of all of my excellent public school education in the city, I was able to get a law degree. What's not so fun is the loan payments that I gotta make. And when they come and demand their loan payment, I can't tell them, give me a couple of months on this, give me a couple of years on this, and then I'll pay you back. But for the lawyers that fight for you, tenants, every single day in court for their organizations, the city says, we owe you money, we have a contract with you, but we're gonna wait a couple of months, we're gonna wait a couple of years before we actually pay you back. That is unacceptable, and that doesn't happen in any other sector. If we really care about fully funding right to counsel, if we really care about providing that protection, the city will pay these organizations on time. That's the kind of mayor I will be.
So right now, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it then. Right now with right to counsel, the city is funding it only at 27% of what the entire program costs. And then we are asking ourselves why it's not working fully citywide. It's because we're not funding it to actually be at that level. And with the money that the city does give, we are in month 5 now of a contract that the city has yet to sign off on through HRA. Month 5, no money paid beyond the initial down payment. This is ridiculous. What we need to do is, and I think there's agreement on this stage, about creating a fine for the city if they don't pay that money on time, but that has to be paid out to the nonprofits. We have to also invest in the full cost of the service. If we want to defend tenants, every single tenant across the city needs to be defended and not rely that housing court moves so slow that that's the only relief that they're going to get. The way that we can actually pay for that, because that's always the question when it comes to standing up for working people, is we can spend the money that we are currently pouring into a shelter system. We can actually keep people in their homes for a fraction of that cost. But we don't want to do that because too many people are making too much money off of this inefficiency when it comes to working class people.
You know, people assume that city government provides services, right? Agencies provide services, but the reality is we contract out to nonprofits, to organizations that do the frontline work. The heroes of COVID were the people who we contracted with, who actually provide services.
Yes.
So when it comes to lawyers on the front line, they have an extra burden, as Zelda articulated, which is law degrees ain't cheap. And you get into debt very fast, and it's hard to get out of it, especially if you want to do public service like being a state senator or mayor. But the reality is, we lose people who say, I want to do public service. I want to help tenants so they don't get evicted. I want to help the grandmothers and the grandfathers who are facing homelessness. But I can't, because I have to spend $5,000 a month or $3,000 a month paying back my loan. So it is outrageous that this administration and the administration I fought with for 8 years over these procurement issues can't seem to get it together to pay the bills on time, increase the funding on the front lines, because, and let me say as former controller when I was doing math every day, we end up paying for this in the way we save money down the line. Because every time someone is evicted, what happens? They go to the shelter system.
Yes.
Shelter system's expensive. And that is something that we have to think about.
Some cities, I know Philadelphia is one example, they actually are trying to avoid housing court. They have a housing diversion program that's kind of a non-lawyer answer to this that tries to settle cases quickly. Is that something that you would be open to? I guess I'll ask Scott.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that, that's something you'd be open to rather than fully funding this not so great right to counsel program?
Well, no. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. Look, when I was a young member of the assembly and I went to figure out what subcommittee I was going to have, they give you a list of subcommittees, right? And the speaker thinks like it's the biggest deal of your life, right? So I go to the speaker at the time and I say, I want to form a new subcommittee. And he goes, well, we don't do that here. I said, no, I have an idea. I want to do the subcommittee on housing court. So I have worked on this issue for a very long time. And I believe very, very much that if we end stipulations in the hallways, if we pay the legal aid attorneys and others who do this work, if we can create partnerships with some of the skilled lawyers in the city that can come in and help, we will save the city millions of dollars and save the lives of many women and children and people who are stuck in this cycle of destruction because we're simply not doing the mayoral work of getting this done. And by the way, being mayor is not only about, introducing bills and having big ideas. At some point, you gotta constitute the government. You gotta build the agencies. You gotta attract the best and the brightest. That's the problem with Adams. He didn't attract any of the best and the brightest, and they're stealing from us every day. We have got to change that.
Any of the best and brightest.
So I carry the bill for student loan forgiveness for public interest lawyers, and I've been able to pass it in the state senate every year. We've been unable to pass it in the New York State Assembly, so we're hoping that come the next legislative session, we'll be in a much better place and hopefully be able to make that a reality once and for all for our attorneys. I walked the picket line with MFJ up in the Bronx many months ago, and in talking with those attorneys who were out there in the cold, it was a pretty windy day, we talked about how we could help a lot of these tenants. And I agree, we can't just be ready to play defense when they come after us tenants. We have to be able to have the time and the resources to play offense. Using that worst landlords list, but also when it comes to procurement, make sure that OMB isn't just the entity at City Hall that's negotiating the contracts, and decentralizing the Mayor's Office of Contract Services so that there's a person in every single agency that is looking at these contracts to make sure that those RFPs are going out a lot earlier than they do, so that our community-based organizations and contracting vendors actually are able to plan ahead and have the money on hand to do what they need to do to serve New Yorkers.
Thank you. Now, we've been talking a lot about housing. Obviously, an extremely connected position is homelessness. 1 in 8 children were homeless in the last year. This is a broad question, but what is your voucher and shelter policy as mayor to pursue and to fix the homelessness crisis? And we are starting with, yes, Michael Blake.
Come on, Mr. Blake.
Well, if someone whose family was homeless, let's be clear that the city has been pimping on homeless communities over and over again. And people don't want to talk about it, and it's called what it is, that you have a nonprofit system regularly, that they're actually not trying to address the problem, they're trying to keep people as homeless. How do I know that? Because we have working homeless across this city. When I was fighting for you during COVID, when we were giving out food and masks in World Central Kitchen, we were helping homeless families across our city. When we think about the children that are going around New York City public schools, I went to PS 79 and 118 in DeWitt Clinton. Every single day we are watching what's happening. So it's not just about reforming a voucher system. That's the Band-Aid. It's about disrupting the system and doing what's right for the people. And too often what is happening right now, we are actually not addressing the core issues. How do you help someone not be homeless in the first place? That is the actual strategy. How do you actually help someone have a job and have higher wages and have the protections in the first place, as opposed to just trying to give a voucher on the back end? At the end of the day, we have to have humanity. Lastly, I know time is here. We cannot ignore the reality that whoever is the next mayor, and God willing it will be me, that you have a Trump administration that is going after our communities. That will have damaging impacts on all of our communities because of not just vouchers and all the funding. So who is ready literally on day one to have success in DC, state, Albany, and the city? My name is Michael Blake, and I present to you Be That Candidate.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so to me, this is, and this is why I'm such a big fan of Karen Bash. She took 21,000 people off the street in her first year. You know how she did it? It wasn't about vouchers, it wasn't about economics, it was about putting people in physical facility, physical homes, putting them in apartments, putting them in places where they could live. That's what she did, that's what I want to do. How do we do that, right? We've got 74 million square feet of vacant office space in the city. 74 million. Do you know how many Empire State Buildings that would fill? 26, right? It's just empty space. We've got to be able to figure out a way to take the homeless population that does not require mental health services and put them in places where we have facilities that they can use that are warm and safe, where we can provide them supportive services. There are enough spaces in this city to do it. With respect to the mentally ill, it's a much more challenging problem because there are not enough facilities for them. They need care. My sister ended up in jail because the mental health system couldn't take her anymore. And when she went to jail, she got evicted. It's a terrible, terrible situation. But unless we're going to actually all agree that we're going to invest the money to help the mentally ill homeless by giving them places that they can go that are safe, where they can get mental health counseling and treatment and medications that will help them restore their lives, then this is all a bunch of nonsense. Because that's where at least 70% of the problem is.
Can I get a brief follow-up on that? This mayor has really increased sweeps of homelessness and trying to get them off the street. Is that something that you would support? I guess in furtherance of that plan?
I don't believe in sweeping people at all. I believe in helping people find the services that they need to make sure that they can get treated. And for the mentally ill homeless, we need places to put them. And there are plenty of places where the city can invest in mental health services. Nobody can sustain a home if they're mentally ill. I don't know how many people have that to do with that.
Homelessness makes you sick. Homelessness makes you sick. Homelessness makes you disabled.
What I can tell you is from my own personal experience. My sister became homeless because she's mentally ill. And so what I believe is I believe in providing people with the services that they need to treat the condition that they have, whatever caused that condition. And there are two necessary things: a place to live and counseling and medication to help them. Those are the two things that we need to be providing the mentally ill homeless, and we need to be providing it now.
Senator Murphy?
Homelessness is effectively a housing problem. It is a housing problem. If we do not have permanent houses for people to live in, they will be homeless. And it's not just our fellow New Yorkers who are suffering from mental illness. There are many New Yorkers on the brink of homelessness right now who are working. Who are one paycheck away from homelessness. So I do think it's important that we bolster our voucher program. I have been an advocate and a supporter of the housing access voucher program that would put state money into this and allow for those who are either on the brink of homelessness or who are exiting homelessness to use that voucher to get to permanent housing. I also think the city is spending far too much money on building new shelters, when we should be building permanent housing. That's what we should be doing. That's what I would do as mayor.
Housing is health.
The first thing we have to do is turn the page for Mayor Adams' administration. What that means is stop vetoing expansions of voucher programs. Start implementing those expansions. And let's actually get to work to ensure that we can put homeless New Yorkers into homes. What I heard from someone just earlier this week is he has a number of clients who've been approved for a voucher, and he cannot find a landlord to take that. Do you know why he can't take that? He can't find that landlord? It's because Mayor Adams has cut the investigations into source of income discrimination by 40% when it comes to the City Commission on Human Rights. We need to finally pay those lawyers a parity wage and put them to work to investigate the complaints that are taking place across the city, where New Yorkers have a voucher in hand and they cannot find a landlord who wants to take more than $3,000 a month just to put somebody into their own unit. That is something we have to do. We have to do that.
I agree with the previous speakers. I would like to mention that the solution is about increasing supply of low-income housing, because whether you have a mental health issue, whether you have an employment issue, whether you have children or a single-parent issue, domestic violence issue, it all starts with making sure that you have a roof over your head.
That's right.
And if we don't have a housing first initiative for the people who need it, then we're going to be back here talking again about the same problem round and round. We need somebody who understands how to make sure that we actually take ideas and programs. Can I just finish 1 second? The reality is we need to start to think about how we actually get these programs to the finish line. And I believe that we need a housing program in addition to creating density, which is a great, we're now YIMBYs and NIMBYs and BIMBYs and whatever. I don't know what the hell I am anymore. But what I want to argue is that the job of government, different than the private sector, is to build the kind of housing that can meet the needs, supportive housing, whether it's for people who are struggling or people who just need a roof over their head. And we should start holding elected officials to that role.
Senator?
I have so many shelters in my district in East Elmhurst near LaGuardia Airport, and I don't believe shelters are dignified housing for human beings. We don't need shelters. We need supportive housing with wraparound services for people to make sure that they are getting the attention that they need. Some people need low-level mental health services. Some people need some higher level mental health services. There should be an appropriate facility system for those group of New Yorkers. Andrew Cuomo erroneously over a decade ago closed down all of our mental health facilities. Some of those still are in some working order, can be refurbished, can be reopened, can be restaffed. We need to inspire a new generation of mental health professionals to be ready in every language that New Yorkers speak to be able to address our mental health issues. But beyond that, there are too many people without mental health issues who are having issues being able to afford to live in New York even though they're working. This is why workforce development programs should be a part of supportive housing and wraparound services so that we can put people who want to work work and are able to work, to be able to give them a fighting chance to be able to continue to afford to live in New York City. That's why housing services should go to the deputy mayor for housing, and those two things should be coupled together so that we have a comprehensive strategy to put the shelter system in the past.
People around the table.
Housing is a human right.
You gotta fight for it.
Did you all see the report recently that 1 in 8 of New York City public school kids is homeless? That is a scandal. How can we live in a city where 1 in 8 of our kids is homeless? There ought to be the level of outrage everywhere that there is in this room. And this is why I am making a focus on homelessness the #1 issue of my campaign. You watch what all of us are going to do. Everybody's going to have kind of one issue. We can, listen to me, end street homelessness of severely mentally ill people in New York City. End it in the first term of the next mayoral administration. And you heard the words that we need to do it, and they are housing first. You don't put people into shelters because shelters are the place folks don't want to go. The combination of vouchers and supportive services enable you to use the apartments that we have now and make sure you get all those folks off the street. Then they're not in Rikers, then they're not in hospitals and mental institutions. We will actually save money by doing it. Now, for other folks who are in shelters, take a look at the comptroller's website. We keep a dashboard of what works to get people out of shelters and into permanent housing. I wish my peers could
Make shelter accountable.
Access voucher program, but now the only thing that's doing it is the city VEPS voucher program, and it is something that has to be funded.
Make shelter accountable.
That has to be implemented.
Sue the shelters.
The expansion of city VEPS is being litigated, at least right now. I mean, the mayor refused to do it, the city council sued. Obviously, you're in the middle of that, right? I mean, what's the...
No, but this is very simple. Elect a new mayor who, I mean, yes, Mayor Adams has refused to implement the city VEPS program, litigated against it, and is failing to implement even the amount that we have currently, as Zoran said, failing to have lawyers enforce when people are refusing to take it, which is the law, it's discrimination, and he is not doing it. So the way to solve that one is elect a new mayor.
Make shelter accountable.
Are you part of that lawsuit? Have you joined, and if not, why?
Well, no, so in that case, the mayor is the one who sued.
Oh, right, okay, defendant, all right.
And unfortunately, he won that lawsuit. But he is a new mayor who actually is willing to work with the council to implement city VEPS, get it expanded, and actually enforce the law.
I think the city was one of the
So, we have a couple more questions.
They need to make shelter accountable.
Like supportive stuff. We're gonna get to, we're gonna cut down answers now to 30 seconds if possible. So try to answer even more succinctly, straightforward. One thing that the West Side Neighborhood Alliance, a lot of these folks have been working on is short-term rentals, cracking down on Airbnbs. And there was some great success with the city council bill to enforce longstanding rules that really lowered the amount of Airbnbs, increased the amount of just apartments on the market in New York. There's a new city council bill that was introduced that would actually roll some of that back and kind of promote Airbnbs again in New York. So we're starting this time with Jim, I believe. And I want to ask, would you support, I guess, what's your thought on Airbnb short-term rentals? Would you support a new law that would roll that back a little bit? Or do you want to keep the current protections, that kind of thing? And again, 30 seconds for this one.
Yeah, I'll be super short. I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. It's something I need to study more. What I agree with 100% is that if you want to deal with problems like that, you just need to add more housing, and the city needs to start building it now. Not like 6 months from now. As I said before, there are vacant lots. We're worried about Airbnb. There are vacant lots where the city could put shovels in the ground right now, and they're not doing it. Why? Because it's a lack of imagination. Every single time I hear one of these answers, I hear essentially a version of the same old thing that we've heard so many times. Let's stop talking about this. Let's put shovels in the ground, and let's build housing so we don't need Airbnb.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with the bill, but I think the step that we took, or the city council took rather, to help put more apartments back online was the right one, and I support that.
Thank you, Zoran.
I firmly oppose this legislation. We are in a housing crisis. What this legislation seeks to do is put entire units of housing back onto Airbnb and out of where a tenant could be calling their own home. This is something that we have to oppose because what it would be is a first of its kind, dangerous precedent across the state. And it is something that right now we need to make clear. Housing units across New York City need to remain exactly that.
Sometimes you know where someone stands by the work they've done. And when I was controller, we took on Airbnb. We issued the definitive report that showed that the more Airbnb is on the market, the more affordable housing we're losing. You know how they responded? They waged a $1 million TV campaign against me. Said our data was wrong, that it didn't make sense. They went on the airwaves. They got big national folks to come and talk about this issue. But we stared them down. Legislation was passed. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we have the resources and the knowledge to fight them, because you see, they come back in the midst of the housing crisis.
Thank you, Senator.
I won't be a mayor for Airbnb. I'm ready to fight like a mother for every affordable housing that we can build and that we can preserve in New York City. This is about making sure we are keeping people housed. This is also about making sure we are protecting union workers at HTC, because Airbnb is actually also about union busting. So the Airbnb is not good for our economy, and our backbone of the economy, the low and middle income class of this city, is who we need to protect.
I was proud in the city council to vote for the legislation that restricted Airbnbs, and we're not going to let it be rolled back. They did spend millions against us. Uber did the same when we required minimum pay for Uber and Lyft drivers. Seamless and DoorDash and Uber Eats did the same when we required minimum pay for deliveristas. Both of those were my laws. They spent lots of money against them. Gig companies are not going to spend millions of dollars in lobbying to tell New Yorkers whether we can have affordable housing or decent jobs. We are going to do that.
To the question and to Jim's answer, we have to actually see the bill. There's a bold band here. I know in a lot of communities, whether it be South Bronx, here in Manhattan, across the city, where there are people that are utilizing Airbnb to get extra money for their own household.
Come on now.
And we are ignoring that part of the conversation. It's easy just to say, let's just bash it completely. Now, what we need to do is make sure you have protections for your homes. But let's not ignore the fact that the actual majority of the people that are utilizing Airbnb as homes are Black and brown people who are trying to make more money in their respective communities. And the reality is we can keep ignoring that dynamic, but we actually have to see the bill, which is the question, and see what's happening. Why are so many people actually considering this? Because they are trying to figure out additional way to bring money into their own households. And so I'm just asking that we actually see what the legislation is and then make that determination. The question was asked, as mayor, would you roll back? There's obviously things that none of us would know because there's things that can be modified. We literally just saw modifications on City of Yes.
I'll share the bill with y'all. It's public. It's out there.
It is public, but the question at the end of the day is, what would you do here? And I'm using the example that we just saw this week. City of Yes modifications happening by the day. And so at the end of the day, if we are in the room, let's have that consideration and assess it from there.
Thank you. Hopefully soon, there will be a full mayoral forum just on public housing at NYC. But I'm sadly going to have to limit this answer again to like 30 seconds. So I want to keep your answers short and succinct. But the big picture is that Donald Trump is coming as president again. And we know that he is not going to be a big funder of public housing. So what is your step? You know, you're going to be, all of you are going to be the next mayor in a Trump administration. What is your next step for public housing? How to improve it? And is conversion to private management something that you support? And we'll start again at the beginning here with Lozano.
Yeah, so I put out a plan. I have a plan that is open to the public, that is open to comment and feedback. I've represented 23 NYCHA developments in my state senate career. I've walked through the hallways, I've been in those apartments, I've yelled at NYCHA, I have fought for legislation to help speed up repairs.
Sorry about that, okay?
If we keep doing exactly what we have been doing, nothing will change. We cannot accept the status quo. So I have put forward a plan that would help with the rehabilitation of NYCHA apartments, that would give them the public amenities they deserve, that would not
The federal responsibility. Now that we know that that is the reality, we cannot play this game of avoiding whose responsibility it is. The city and the state need to step up together to finally put the investment that's required. Because that's what it used to be. In the 90s, we saw there was more support coming in until Bloomberg eliminated that operating support. In 2003, we saw a different understanding of responsibility. It's time to go back to precedent and stand up for working class New Yorkers who live in public housing, and it's not even worth calling it housing given the conditions of what it is.
They've been doing it just to give it to the developers.
One more thing, you're generalizing about public housing. Every development is different. They're trying to demolish mine, and that is not the truth. Stop playing to the narrative.
Let me, look, there's no doubt that we're going to be in for a very rough time in Washington. We have 18 months or 20 months to elect Hakeem Jeffrey Speaker. That has to be a priority, because that's how we take back Congress and take back the federal government. But let me just tell you that, I've been on the front line of this, for a long time. When I was controller, I took an idea that Battery Park City surplus money should be directed to NYCHA. Dedicated funding stream, remember that? I want to tell you how good my negotiating skills are, because we don't talk about how we get things done. I'm going to do it in 10 seconds. Here's what I did. You needed the controller, the governor, and the mayor to agree to it. So I called Cuomo, and I said, if we sign off on this, if you sign off on this, we can get a lot of money to NYCHA. He goes, okay, I'll think about it. I called de Blasio. I said,
This is more than 10 seconds.
I think Cuomo is going to do this. He goes, then I'm going to do this. So I had the two of them, because they all thought they were competing with each other. That's part of the problem with Cuomo runs for governor, right? And I say this to you is because we have to think about different funding streams going forward.
No private management of our NYCHA buildings, no developers, no land for sale, no infills, no any of that. We have to keep public housing. We need more of it, not less of it. It's about making sure that for the next few years, we're gonna have to be a little scrappier than we've been. And this is why good management skills and being able to leverage our resources is going to be really important. We're going to have to streamline those tickets even more than they've been. We're going to have to make sure that those repairs that are done well the first time by people who know how to do those repairs. Because that can't continue to be a business. That has to be done well the first time so that we can give dignified housing to New Yorkers.
What we're doing here today is listening to tenants, and that's what I did in NYCHA. I put the power of the controller's audits in the hands of NYCHA residents. We created a NYCHA resident audit committee. People applied to get on. We talked to thousands of you. And we asked you, what do you want to audit? And you said, first, the vendors who do the repairs in our units. That work never gets done. 50% of the time, we show the invoices show the work doesn't get done. So when I'm mayor, we'll create a Yelp for NYCHA repairs app, and the vendors are not going to get paid unless the tenants affirm that the work actually got done in their units and got done well. The next audit that is coming out, and some of you asked for this as well, is an audit of eviction rates in RAD-packed units, because tenants deserve to know the full story. This should be a choice that is made by NYCHA residents in your buildings, and you deserve to have the full information on what's available for comprehensive modernization through Section 9 with Trump, what the trust, how the trust will work, and what the real deal is with RAD.
I represented more NYCHA residents in New York City than anyone in the Assembly, so let's give you some answers. First of all, earlier this year and last year, the 70 people that the U.S. Attorney was going to send to court to jail, we actually need to hold them accountable. The folks that work at NYCHA that were lining their pockets as opposed to fixing your home, actually have to be held accountable. Before we talk about developers and other things, Second, the worst landlord in New York City is actually the night shift. And the reality is that if we don't actually fix the problems of you having heat and hot water and dignity, as well as taking it a step further, when we talk about public safety, we actually have to make sure you have better lighting when you're walking around. Let's reduce the scaffolding that's happening around night shift. Let's actually make sure the senior centers are reopening these facilities. Give you functioning playgrounds. It's the reason why I work with Danny Barber and people across the city to focus on what's happening within NYCHA. You can have public safety, public housing, public schools, all be good at the same time.
And do you support private management? Do you support Brad Pack, private management?
I don't, but we also have to assess, as we are reviewing, there were entities that came into many parts of our city that the tenants did want to have conversations with them. And that's the reason why you're seeing there's several head nodders up here. People don't want to say that out loud. We should listen to what the tenants are actually saying.
Yes! Yes!
Exactly.
So good, I'm glad most people are agreeing with me. So the question is that the reason why, to this question, it is very difficult to give a blanket yes or no, is because there have been tenants who have said they're open to it and others who have said they're not. We should listen to the tenants what they actually want.
Listen, hold on. So, in 30 seconds, I'm going to tell you this. Washington's lied about this. Albany's lied about this. City Hall's lied about this. Why is the NYCHA community in the situation it's in? They devote $2 billion. They add $2 billion worth of revenue to our city, and they get no credit for it. They are keeping their communities together. As mayor, I'm going to do what he said. I'm going to listen to each and every community. They want private management, let's talk about it. They don't want private management, let them have control over their own destiny. Yes. They want build first, and they want new apartments, amazing. Let's make it happen. They want to preserve what they have, let's preserve what they have and make it better. And let's comply with Section 3 by training NYCHA people to get the jobs that they deserve to fix their own communities. Because that's what the law requires. And no one has followed it for 40 years. 40 years, remember that. No one's followed that law.
I will now exactly on to our last question. This is going to be basically a closing statement. You get one sentence. You use comments in one sentence. And we're actually going to start with Jim, so we're going to come back.
Yeah, here's my closing statement.
Sorry, there's it's a prompt. Sorry, it's not just a closing statement. In one sentence, and we've seen a variation. It's what role will the real estate industry have in your administration? We've seen very different answers from the past 3 mayors, very different answers from Bloomberg, from de Blasio, from Adams. So if you all want to be the next mayor, one sentence, what role will the real estate industry have in your administration? And again, we'll start with Jim and come back this way.
Yeah, so in terms of in my administration, I have no idea, but what I'll tell you is I'm not shutting doors on anybody, right? This is
That's
a crisis.
one sentence, I'm sorry.
This is a crisis. That's good. This is a crisis. Everyone has a seat at the table.
From where?
In my administration, everyone has a seat at the table.
Mike?
Public has a seat at the table.
The people will lead us, not real estate developers. If you want to learn more about our city, our dreams, join us at BlakeNYC.com.
I'm pretty sure I'm the only candidate who has pledged that I do not and will not accept campaign contributions from real estate developers. Today, housing is a human right, and that's how we're going to treat it in New York City.
Thank you, Jessica.
I am ready to fight like a mother for my fellow tenants as your mayor. Tenants make up 70% of this city. That is who we need also occupying the halls of power, including the administration.
Thank you.
Many of you know my record as an assembly member, borough president, controller on tenants' rights, unmatched. I've worked with many of you, but let's be clear. I'm going to make sure that we have an opportunity to sit with tenants and real estate and change the trajectory. I'm not playing to the crowd. We got to get this done.
I like it.
The role of real estate in my administration will be the first L of LLC, limited.
In the Mayoral administration, the real estate industry will be expected to build housing for all New Yorkers and will be held accountable with the full force of the law when they step over the line.
All right, thank you so much. To all about it. We really appreciate your time. Thank you all for being here.
The rent. The rent. The rent. The rent. The rent. The rent. Freeze the rent.
Raise the rent.
Freeze the rent. Freeze. Who's that? Who's that? Freeze the rent.
All right, again, we have our last set of workshops on the 4th floor from 3 to 4 p.m.
You work with him? Elizabeth with the future mayor?
God willing.
Yes, yes. What's your name, brother?
Dynick.
I'm sorry?
Dynick.
Diamond. Pleasure.
You need to make shelter accountable. They're stealing a lot of money from the city and they're treating homeless like a homeless are a piece of shit.
It's been wrong, regularly.
So, make shelter accountable.
Did anybody want to take a picture with him?
Yes,
Yeah, of course.
Did you take a picture of him and then you're supporting him?
He's the top. He's top.
And again, this is the pieces that everyone needs to run their race right now. And so if you like what he said, you want him to be able to run his race so you can see him do the things he's saying, right? So let them take
You
their
need to make
picture.
shelter accountable.
Yes, we do. I did, as you know. As
So,
you know.
what is your opinion on shelter being accountable?
¿Vienes como inquilino? Como inquilino. ¿Vienes como...
What are you gonna do with the shelters that making millions of dollars and they treating homeless like less than human beings?
You know, I did the investigations of the terrible conditions in the homeless shelters. That was my work as controller, and I believe very strongly that we need real supportive permanent housing because the shelters are a place where people go and get really hurt.
Because, excuse me. Oh, Mr. Bradlander, are you gonna make shelters accountable?
I forgot that.
Yes, oh yeah, for sure. She's on that committee, the Nature Resident Audit Committee.
I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
I'm actually Renee, and I'm a
Renee? Oh, great, okay. Oh, yeah, you were the one who said that, all right.
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you. God bless you, good.
949 signatures against the demolition.
Okay, all right.
After 550 that they keep speaking.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, if
Quick
we say
question.
it's gotta be in the hands of tenants, it's gotta
Well,
be in the hands of
tenants, not just the
tenants.
tenant association president.
No, the
That's who it
tenants,
has to
like
be.
a real democratic voice of tenants themselves.
Okay, that hasn't been happening.
No, I got it, I hear you, all right. Thank you.
Question: you gonna make shelters accountable? Are you gonna make shelters accountable for their wrongdoing, like stealing money from the city and they treating homeless like less than human beings, especially elder and disabled?
Yeah, people
Because the
gotta be
shelter
held
system is very
accountable.
corrupt.
Yeah, it is, people gotta be
It
held
wasn't in
accountable.
newspaper. Are you gonna make them accountable?
Yeah.
If you become a mayor,
Absolutely, yes.
you have failed one time.
Sí,
Listen, Danny. Question for you.
Please. Is it a
No,
selfie
question.
question or am I here?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
The shelter system, as you know, is very corrupt.
Yeah.
You experienced that somehow, and especially that they mistreat disabled people and elderly people, and they only care about profits. What are you gonna do about it? if you could become a mayor?
I think the first thing we have to do is stop relying on the shelter system as the way that we provide housing to people who've been priced out of their homes. We have to keep people in their own homes so that we have far fewer New Yorkers in shelters. Right now, there are a lot of New Yorkers who are in shelters who have vouchers that have been approved by the city, and they can't find a single landlord who'd be willing to take them. So we have to ensure that they can actually put them to use, and then we have to have actual oversight of the entire shelter system, because a lot of these contracts have
But
been
can we,
given out.
sorry to interrupt, can we do both at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to.
Because they making a lot of money, a lot of profits. I was kicked out of an event.
Yeah.
Maybe because they saw me as like I want to ask questions. I signed up for it, and they at the end says, "I'm sorry, you're not registered," but I was registered at the front. When we come to the security, I went upstairs. I recheck again, and they say, "I'm sorry, you're not on my phone," so they kick me out because a lot of people of power who want to build more shelters and a lot of people business. I think that's the reason they kick me out. I'm suspecting, but anyway, the shelter system needs to be reformed.
Absolutely.
And it's like the hotel that you know about. I'm not gonna put that in the public because it's a public view.
Yeah.
It's from one elected official, one colleague of yours. He told me that they pay in double the amount for people staying there, but they cut off. When you go to their website, they have Wi-Fi, but they cut it because when it comes to homeless.
That's horrific.
And the owner of this hotel owns 8 hotels plus in the city. So.
No, I fully agree. We have to reform.
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Getting ready for the question. Mr. Blake. Blake. Blake.
I'm one of them. And I died on the train in 2019.
We have 5 bottom men right here. Look at him with those glasses. 5 bottom men.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Look at him, 5 bottom men.
No, he got to get the silver spoon. Get the silver spoon.
Okay.
Well, now it's bragging on bragging like this.
Well, you was bragging, right? It's been 3 years. You know what you was doing. White and red.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Hi.
We know.
Give me your name first of all.
My name is. Okay.
What do you want me to say?
My name is.
Hold on. Let me do the question, and then you elaborate more.
They're about to pull me out for another
Okay.
forum here.
As you know,
Just tell
my
me your
name
name.
is Dinik, D-I-N-I-C-K.
Okay.
I'm proud LGBTQ,
Amen.
atheist. I don't believe in God and religious books, and I'm a homeless advocate.
Okay.
So the shelter system is very corrupt. They threw it. She's gonna help me with the elaborate more.